They call me the villain now. Small town whispers carry faster than truth, and in this town, truth's never had much of a fighting chance. Everywhere I go, grocery store, post office, even church on Sundays, I see the looks, the tight-lipped nods, the way conversations pause when I walk in. And I'm tired. Tired of defending myself for something that was never as black and white as folks want it to be. Tired of being painted as heartless just because I stopped pretending. Yes, mistakes were made. But love, real love, is messy, complicated, and sometimes it doesn't look the way people expect. I didn't cheat to hurt anyone. I cheated because I was already gone long before I left. If you've ever been judged without the whole story or blamed for choosing your truth over someone else's comfort, stay with me. I'm going to show you how I found peace after being branded the town's shame. Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about survival, too. My name's Lily, I'm 25, and if you asked anyone in town right now, they'd probably tell you I'm a cautionary tale. Another girl who couldn't settle down, couldn't be satisfied, couldn't keep her past where it belonged. But here's the truth most folks don't care to hear. I lived a whole life before Robert ever showed up, and I wasn't ashamed of it. When we first got together, things felt easy, in that golden hour kind of way. He was 26, worked in tech consulting, some job that sounded like a jumble of passwords and corporate buzzwords. I never really understood it, but he seemed proud of it. We rented this cozy little apartment downtown, all exposed brick and creaky wood floors. The kind of place you imagine you'll grow into. People said we looked perfect. Maybe we did. Robert held doors, paid bills, and never made a fuss when I wanted to grab drinks with my friends. By all accounts, he was boyfriend material, the dependable kind you're supposed to hold on to. But what folks didn't see, what he couldn't see, was that I came into this relationship whole. I already had people who mattered to me. Chief among them was Ethan. Ethan and I met 3 years ago, long before Robert. He's 27, wicked smart, and has the kind of humor that sneaks up on you and stays. We clicked fast, not romantically, just soul-level understanding. He's the kind of friend who shows up with coffee when your world falls apart and never asks you to explain. From the start, I told Robert about him. I wasn't hiding anything. I wasn't trying to spark jealousy. I just believed in being honest. I didn't think I had to erase my past to make room for someone new. Turns out, I was wrong. Because Robert didn't say much at first, but slowly you start to feel it, the tightening, the quiet pauses when I mentioned Ethan's name, the way he stopped smiling when he walked into the room and saw us laughing over something dumb on my phone. It wasn't obvious, but it was there, like a draft coming in under a closed door. I thought we were strong enough to handle it, that the love we'd built could stand on its own, without having to cut away pieces of who I was before him. But what I thought was maturity was just Robert holding his breath, waiting for me to change. And eventually, when I didn't, he let go. Cold, sharp, like snapping a branch and pretending it was already broken. And now folks are whispering like I'm the one who messed it all up. But this is where the real story begins. Because if you've ever been punished for being honest or lost someone who couldn't handle all the pages in your story, you'll want to hear what happened next. Looking back now, I suppose the mistake wasn't that I had a past, it's that I assumed I could carry it forward without having to apologize for it. Like most people in their mid-20s, I'd been through a few false starts, some late-night regrets, and a handful of moments I wouldn't exactly tattoo across my forehead. But I also believed, and still do, that we aren't required to drag every ghost into a new relationship, parade them around, and ask for permission to exist. When I told Robert about Ethan, I told him what mattered, that he was a close friend, that we shared a sense of humor, that we went way back, and I made sure he knew there was nothing romantic between us. I believed that honesty meant telling what was true now, not every detail of what had come before. I didn't lie, but I didn't volunteer everything either. Ethan and I, we had history, the kind you don't frame or celebrate, but the kind that lingers quietly beneath the surface, like embers long after a fire's gone out. For a while, we were friends with benefits, though I've never liked that term. It was casual. We were both single. It was never about love or even affection, really. Just comfort, plain and simple. Two people helping each other through lonely patches in a city that never stops moving. And when Robert came along, that stopped, mostly. There were a few blurry nights in the early days. Nights when Robert and I were still figuring things out. We weren't exclusive, we hadn't said the words, and Ethan and I were, well, we were still dancing around each other, out of habit more than anything else. Nothing that felt like cheating, not to me. But I suppose timelines get fuzzier when feelings get involved. Robert never asked, and I never told. I didn't think I had to. He seemed fine with my friendship with Ethan at first. We'd all even been in the same room once or twice, me trying to keep things light, Robert smiling politely, Ethan cracking jokes like he didn't know the tension was thick enough to chew. But as the weeks wore on, I saw it. Robert started pulling back in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. He changed the subject when Ethan came up. His eyes would harden when I mentioned a concert or a quick coffee run. He'd say things like, "Must be nice having someone who really gets you," and laugh too tightly afterward. I asked once if everything was okay. He said he was fine. And then came the blow-up. We were supposed to be going to dinner with his sister and her fiancé. I was in the middle of putting on lipstick when he came into the bathroom holding my phone. His face was pale, his hand trembled. "You and Ethan hooked up?" I stared at him. My mouth dried out. My mind tried to catch up with how he knew. "I saw the messages," he said before I could speak, "from months ago, before we were official, but you never said anything, and now you expect me to believe it's all in the past?" I tried to explain. I told him it was casual, that it meant nothing, that it stopped once he and I became serious, that I didn't think it was relevant, that I didn't lie, I just didn't bring up something I didn't think mattered. But the thing about trust? It's not always about the facts. It's about the gaps in the story, the things unsaid, the moments someone looks you in the eye and wonders what else you left out. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He just left. And I sat there, staring at my reflection, lipstick half finished, hair still pinned. The image of a woman trying to be everything to everyone and ending up misunderstood by the one person who was supposed to know her best. I told myself it wasn't fair, that Robert should have said something earlier if he felt uneasy, that we were adults and adults have histories, that if he really loved me, he'd understand context and complexity. But late at night, when the noise dies down and the self-righteousness softens, I can admit something else too. Maybe I should have told him. Not because I owed it to him, but because relationships deserve full stories, not just the parts we're proud of. The worst part? It wasn't just losing Robert. It was watching how quickly the people around me picked sides, how the whispers started in the group chat, how my friends looked at me a little differently, like I'd crossed some invisible line between independent and reckless. How even Ethan, who once knew me better than anyone, sent a one-line text that just said, "Sorry I made things harder." And that was it. So here I am, alone but not broken, hurt but still standing. This is the part in the story where some people will say I deserved it, that I played with fire and got burned, that I brought it on myself. Maybe they're right. But I also know this. I loved, honestly. I made mistakes, honestly. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's version of the story, then so be it. Because the truth, my truth, isn't neat or easy, but it's mine. And I'm done apologizing for the parts of my life that made me who I am. There's a kind of silence that creeps into a relationship long before the words run out. It's the silence that lives in sideways glances, in dinners eaten with clinking forks and too long sips of wine. It's the kind where the air is still, but you feel the storm coming anyway. That was us, me and Robert. At first, it felt like the usual bumps. A bit of tension here and there, the occasional cold shoulder, nothing dramatic. I figured we were just two people learning how to settle into life together, ironing out the wrinkles that come when two pasts try to coexist under one roof. Robert always said he was okay with my guy friends, said he respected my independence, that he liked how open I was about everything, especially with Ethan. From day one, I told him Ethan mattered to me, that he'd been in my life for years, that we were close. And Robert nodded, said he understood, that he trusted me. So I believed him. But over time, trust turned into silence, the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. He stopped asking about my day when he knew I'd spent part of it with Ethan. If I mentioned a concert we might go to or a coffee catch-up, his face would tighten just slightly, his smile thinning at the corners. He never yelled, never even raised his voice. He just started pulling away. Looking back, I think I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal, that I didn't need to overanalyze every sigh, every little dig disguised as a joke. You really need to see Ethan again this week. Maybe we could try doing something just the two of us for once. At the time, I chalked it up to clinginess, a little insecurity. We'd all been there, right? Relationships need compromise, sure, but they shouldn't require cutting off pieces of yourself. I told myself Robert just needed time to adjust, that he'd see Ethan wasn't a threat, that this was just a rough patch, nothing more. Besides, Robert wasn't exactly a saint himself. Back in college, he'd told me stories about wild parties and one-night stands with a kind of careless pride, like a badge of honor he carried into adulthood. He didn't try to hide that part of his past. So when he started acting distant because of my past, well, that didn't sit right with me. A double standard, plain and simple. So no, I didn't feel guilty. Not then. But the truth is, I was hiding more than I let on. I hadn't told Robert everything about me and Ethan, not the full history, not the late nights years ago when loneliness blurred into something more, not the soft edges of something once physical that still left traces in the way we joked, the way we touched each other's arms, just a little too long. And sure, maybe it had been mostly in the past by the time Robert and I got serious. Maybe those flirty little glances didn't mean anything anymore. But I never gave Robert a chance to decide how he felt about that. I kept those parts tucked away, wrapped in justifications and technicalities. We weren't official yet. It didn't count. It's not like I loved Ethan. All true, but still, not the whole truth. Sometimes I'd lie awake next to Robert, his back to me, and wonder if he was waiting for me to say it, to confess something, to admit that maybe this friendship was more complicated than I wanted to believe. But I didn't say anything, because saying something might have meant losing both of them. Instead, I chose denial. I clung to the version of the story that made me feel right, the version where I was the understanding girlfriend with a life of her own, and Robert was just too insecure to handle it. The version where honesty meant not volunteering what hadn't been asked. But resentment doesn't need an invitation to grow. It feeds quietly on the things we don't say. And by the time I noticed, it had already taken root. Robert's silence got heavier. His smiles became shorter, rarer. When he touched me, it felt like he was doing it from a distance, like there was a wall between us that neither of us could name, but both of us could feel. He stopped planning weekends, stopped asking questions. I'd walk in from seeing Ethan and he'd just nod, barely looking up from his laptop. One night, I came home from a late dinner. Ethan had been in town for work, and we'd grabbed food like old times. When I walked through the door, Robert was sitting at the table, his face blank. "How was it?" he asked, voice flat. Smiled, dropped my keys in the bowl. "Fine, caught up on stuff." He didn't nod, didn't blink. Just sometimes I wonder if you're still with him in ways you're not even willing to admit. I laughed, trying to shake it off. "Robert, come on, that's not fair." But the look in his eyes, that quiet hurt, that long simmering suspicion, told me he didn't believe his own denial anymore. And truth be told, neither did I. People talk about betrayal like it's this one moment, a kiss, a text, a lie. But sometimes it's a slow build, a series of choices we justify until the truth no longer fits neatly into our hands. I didn't cheat on Robert, but I didn't protect him from doubt either. And the damage, in the end, looked exactly the same. Sometimes the thing that breaks you doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it's quieter, like a card drawn from a game deck on a Saturday night. That night, we were all crammed into Marcus and Emma's living room, the kind of Midwest game night you've probably seen a dozen times. Folding chairs pulled from closets, paper plates stacked with half-eaten nachos, laughter floating above the hum of a box fan that never quite cooled the room. I'd brought Robert, and on the surface everything seemed fine. We held hands, we smiled at all the right moments, we blended in until the wrong question came up. It was a card from one of those truth or consequence style games, a simple prompt, really. Could you forgive a partner who cheated? That room, which had felt so warm just minutes ago, suddenly went tight. No one spoke for a beat. Then Robert, without skipping so much as a breath, jumped in. I couldn't. Never, he said, firm. Cheating's the one thing I can't come back from. If someone can lie to your face while sharing a bed with you, what else can they lie about? It's the ultimate betrayal. And just like that, the room buzzed again. Someone laughed awkwardly. A few heads nodded in agreement. But all I heard was the sound of my own breath catching in my throat. Because I'd done it. Not to Robert, not during our relationship, but once, a long time ago, in a relationship that had already been limping along before I made the mistake that finally pushed it over the edge. It had been with Bryce, my best friend, then and now. A friendship I'd always described as complicated when asked, but mostly I just avoided explaining it altogether. Bryce had been there for me at a time when everything felt broken. My ex, Caleb, and I were fighting constantly. I felt small, forgotten, unloved. And then one night, I let a moment become a mistake. I never told Robert, not because I was hiding it exactly, but because I didn't think it mattered. It had happened a year before we ever met. We weren't even in the same zip code when it happened. I'd grown since then, learned from it. I wasn't the same girl anymore. But in that living room, as Robert kept talking, painting cheaters as morally bankrupt, cold-blooded, unworthy of trust, I could feel the walls closing in. I didn't say a word that night, just smiled, swallowed hard, and prayed no one noticed the way my hands had started shaking. The next day, Robert came to me. His expression was unreadable, too still to be casual. He sat me down on the edge of our bed and asked, "Is there anything about your past relationships you haven't told me?" I knew right then that he already suspected. Whether it was instinct or intuition or something in my eyes the night before, he'd sensed a crack in the story I'd told him about who I used to be. So I told him. I didn't dramatize it. Didn't sugarcoat it either. I said yes, there had been one time, one mistake. I told him the relationship I was in had already been falling apart, that I had felt alone, that it wasn't some long-term affair or a betrayal played out over months. Just one night, one poor choice. It was before I met you, I said. Over a year before. I've never cheated since. I would never do that to you. He didn't raise his voice, didn't storm out. He just stared at the floor like he was trying to rework the math of who I was and who he thought I was supposed to be. And then came the second question. Who was it? That was the one I had hoped wouldn't come. I hesitated for too long. Was it someone I know? He asked. I nodded. Someone you're still friends with? And this time, the silence said more than I ever could. He didn't yell, but something in his face shifted, like a part of him closed a door from the inside. It was Bryce, wasn't it? All I could do was nod again. He got up and left the room. 2 days passed. We didn't talk much. We moved around each other like ghosts, polite but hollow. I kept waiting for him to say something, anything. Part of me hoped he'd come back with understanding, that maybe we'd find a way through this. But when he finally spoke, I knew the truth before he said it. I've made my decision, he said. His voice was quiet but final. I care about you, I do. But I can't stay in a relationship where I feel like the past is still sitting at the table with us. He paused, his hands clenched into fists so tight the knuckles turned white. I keep wondering how many times I've laughed with him, he said, not knowing what happened between you two. How many stories you both told me with half the truth behind them. I can't do it, Lily. I can't pretend it doesn't matter. I wanted to argue, to tell him that people change, that forgiveness is part of love, that the version of me he knew had never lied to him. But he wasn't wrong, because trust isn't just about what you do, it's about what you withhold. And maybe in trying to protect our happiness, I'd built it on a foundation too fragile to stand. He packed his things that night, said goodbye in a voice that sounded like the end of a song you never wanted to stop. I stood at the window and watched him drive away. And I haven't seen him since. The thing no one tells you about being honest is that it doesn't always lead to healing. Sometimes it leads to loss. Sometimes the truth costs more than the lie ever would have. But I don't regret telling him, because I didn't want to build a life with someone who loved a version of me I couldn't keep pretending to be. This was the night it all came undone, but it was also the night I stopped hiding, even from myself. After Robert walked out, the silence in the apartment hit like winter wind, sharp, sudden, and colder than you expect. I tried to fill it the way most people do when their life cracks wide open. I picked up my phone. I called my sister Emma first. She listened patiently, offered the usual soft words about how breakups are hard and how I deserved someone who understood me. But when I told her the full story about Bryce, about the past, about game night, her voice changed. She got quiet. Then she said something that stung more than I expected. "Maybe," she whispered, "you should have been more upfront about all of that." It was like everyone around me had been handed a different version of the script than I had. In mine, I made a mistake years ago, learned from it, and moved forward. But the way people reacted, friends drifting off, texts left unread, invites that never came, it felt like I'd committed some fresh betrayal just last week. Within days, the whole friend group knew, or thought they did, and the whispers started. She never really respected him. She was probably seeing Bryce the whole time. She proved Robert right. Funny how people love to write your story when they're not the ones bleeding from it. I leaned on Bryce for a while. He was the only one not judging me, the only one who didn't make me feel like I had to explain myself every 5 minutes. We'd grab drinks, sit in silence, or talk about anything but what had happened. And for a moment, it felt like safety. But then I did something foolish. I tried to make it more. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe I just didn't want to be alone in that storm. But Bryce, for all his warmth, pulled back fast. "We were better as friends," he said. And just like that, the last door I thought was open closed. Meanwhile, Robert's life moved on like clockwork. Social media showed him smiling wide in a pressed button-down, holding a cocktail at some rooftop event, tagged in posts about promotions and leadership summits. His world had gotten brighter, cleaner, like I'd been a shadow he'd finally stepped out from. The last straw? Seeing the engagement announcement. 6 months after we broke up, Robert was on one knee in a photo, a woman I'd never seen, beaming down at him with a ring that probably cost more than the rent we used to split. The caption? "Found the one I was meant to build a life with." It felt like someone reached through the screen and punched me straight in the chest. At first, I cried. Then I got mad. Then I got quiet. Because here's the thing nobody likes to hear. I still don't think I was the villain. Yes, I made choices. Some messy, some complicated, but I didn't lie to hurt. I didn't betray with cruelty. I made human mistakes in the middle of trying to live a life that felt honest to me. But the world doesn't care about context. It loves a clean narrative. And in this one, I'm the girl who couldn't let go of her past, the girl who wrecked the perfect man, the girl who deserved to be left. But I let them believe that. I'm done explaining, done trying to win back people who never really asked for my side of the story. I'm done saying sorry for something I've already lived through, sat with, and grown from. Maybe one day, I'll leave this town, start somewhere new where people don't know me as her. Maybe I'll find a job that lights me up, or a person who sees all the parts of me and doesn't flinch. But until then, I'm just going to focus on waking up each morning with a little more strength than I had the day before. I'm not perfect, but I'm still standing. And that, for now, is enough. Like I promised you at the beginning, this was never just a story about being left. It was about what came after. The quiet strength of standing back up when the world's done whispering behind your back. If there's one thing I hope you carry with you after hearing this, it's that your past doesn't get to define your future. People may walk away, some may judge, others may forget what you've been through. But you get to choose what comes next. And that's where your peace begins. If you know someone going through the kind of heartbreak that leaves you questioning your worth, share this video with them. Sometimes it just takes one voice, one story, to remind us we're not alone in the mess. And if this story found you at just the right time, I'd be honored to hear your thoughts. You're welcome to leave a comment below. This is a place for honesty, not perfection. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're more than welcome to stick around. We tell them slow and honest here. If this one spoke to something in you, you might also want to watch. He said, "I was too much, so I let him go. Now I finally know why. That was the best thing I ever did." It's another journey through heartbreak, but this time, the ending might just surprise you. Take care of your heart. You're worth the healing.